The final day of the Hearthstone Grandmasters playoffs for the inaugural season continues as we have the second semifinal, Hunter Race versus Psycho. This is a match that's been fated since the beginning of 2018, and we have the pleasure of being able to find out who is going to join Fino in the grand finale and get that coveted global final spot. My name is Frodan, joined by Sottle. In the past few days, we've been combining the Europe and America's Grandmasters casting team, and it's been a wonderful pleasure to be able to dip back into Europe and just see all kinds of really interesting stories culminate into this one. This one's probably my most anticipated match so far in Grandmasters, period, and it's a pleasure to be able to join you guys.
Yeah, it's a fantastic little story we've got going between the two of them because there's a phenomenal amount of respect between the two players, first and foremost. Psycho even mentioned that early on he was very nervous going up against Hunter Race for the first time because, in his words, he was now playing against a pro in the Grandmasters division, which is a little bit of shade at everyone else in the division, but, you know, mostly goes to speak for the level of respect that he has for Hunter Race. But I think when you look at this top four as we had as a whole, I think Admirable set it up perfectly. Like, how could you be upset with any result out of these four players that we have? Like, they both have their own merit, and no one here wants to use the word deserve because all four of these players would deserve a spot, but we need to play out the competition. That's what we're going to let decide it. It's not about who deserves it more, it's about who can get it done when it comes down to the clutch.
Yeah, I guess the better way to phrase it is that no matter the result, you'd be happy for the person that was successful, and you'd also be a little heartbroken for the person that didn't make it, because you understand that both of these players, Hunter Race and Psycho, have such a strong legacy going into it. I think everyone's eyes are on Hunter Race primarily, coming into Grandmaster Season 1 as the reigning Hearthstone World Champion just a few months ago in Taiwan. And then, you know, can he be able to keep that momentum? But can he shift to Specialist format when everyone else had been practicing while this guy was grinding out the Conquest Best of 5 still? And I think a lot of those questions have been answered. He just needed a little bit of a transition period.
Yes.
I mean, you even heard Casper talk to us and maybe even on interviews that he wasn't sure how to even approach Specialist the format at the beginning. He said, you know what, I'm not sure how to really approach this. Maybe I'm not even that good at it. Maybe Specialist as a format has its weaknesses. And then as time goes on, oh, guess what? He's winning nonstop again.
Yep, indeed. But we can see after 8 weeks of practice how he has ended up approaching it. So we can take a look at the deck list that he's brought now. And it's going to be a very familiar matchup for those of you that have followed the recent weeks of Hearthstone Grandmasters. Hunter Race is going to be leading us out on this Mage. He does have that same anti-rogue specific tech that I think Admirable broke down very well in the previous series. I kind of agree with him on his stance. This 2-card sideboard to a tertiary deck just doesn't really feel like it's worth a slot for me. I feel like you can carry some of that over into your primary and have a more dedicated tertiary deck for a different matchup instead. But regardless, two of the most successful players, Fino and Hunter Race, have gone with that strategy, so that probably speaks for itself somewhat.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the one-ofs halftime scavenger in the primary deck lists for the Mage, largely just as a Swiss Army knife, right? You can use it as a pressure tool or to just something to develop on 4, as an opportunity to use Conjurer's Calling, or maybe even just as an anti-aggro option. And it seems like Hunter Race, of course, favoring more of that consistency with Sandbinder instead. However, you can't really fault him on that. It seems like it's been working out fairly well. And, you know, the ultimate thing that comes down is whether or not Psycho's deck can execute its game plan very efficiently, because I feel like the Rogue decks have been faltering a little bit despite having a lot of the good tools that they normally have in this matchup.
Yeah, and it's been very, very consistent in terms of what you bring as a secondary deck to deal with Mage. There's been a little bit of conflict here and there between particular one-ofs, the exact amount of betrayals that you bring in. Psycho, one of the few players that's doing things a little bit differently. No Eviscerate in his main deck, which we have seen from several players. There's been a lot of kind of floating one-ofs around that 2-drop slot, the Novice Engineers, the Sap, the Eviscerates, and so on. He is choosing just to bring an Eviscerate into his secondary deck to deal with Mage, specifically then with the standard stuff that we usually see, Walk the Plank, Fairy Dragon, and Betrayal to back all that up.
Yep, it'd be very ironic that Psycho would use what is many called the Water Rogue to defeat Hunter Race, who was one of the players that were trying to push this specific variation of Rogue to the forefront of the metagame. But let's go ahead and jump into the first game. Hunter Race versus Psycho. Only one player can get through and play a best of 5 for all the marbles, as earlier today, if you missed it, in the Asia Pacific region, Surrender getting a second ticket to a World Championship later this year at BlizzCon. And we'll see whether or not Hunter Race and Psycho can join him.
I would be very excited to see Hunter Ace taking on Fino in a Mage Mirror, because for me, they are the top 2 players with that deck in terms of what I've watched and in terms of who I've learned the most from. I think Fino, perhaps more of a specialist just in terms of the number of games. All right, are you going to do that every time, Dan? Come on. All right,
are you going to do that every time?
Yes, this is kind of my gimmick.
Then we are in agreement.
All right, fine. Hunter Ace, kind of a specialist in terms sorry, Fino kind of a specialist. Oh my god. In terms of mage play and the amount of games that he's grind out with it, Hunter Ace, I think, you know, when he puts a decent amount of time into any deck, he is just one of the best players in the world, so then by association becomes one of the best players with that deck. So I would love to see a super high-level mage mirror between the 2 of them, but that's not to take anything away from Psycho whatsoever.
Well, Psycho with a coin into the Snip Snap. This is a card that he just wants to use to fight for that early game board control, even though a lot of players have been saving it for later high game impact. And I think this is a nod to the fact that there's a lot of early game threats from the Mage that if you don't deal with early can be problematic. One of them is, in fact, the card that Hunter Ace drew, which is Stargazer Luna. How many times have we seen that card absolutely decimate, you know, the Rogue's chance of coming back in the game because it's a 2/4 that can't get dealt with and it draws too many cards?
Once in the very first series, the preceding series before this, Fino rode his way to the spot that both of these players are trying to get into off the back of that early Stargazer Luna in one of the games. But Hunter Ace here, probably slightly more concerned with just relieving a bit of pressure for now, because it has been quite an aggressive start for Psycho. I actually kind of want to change my mind on a whim here, because I kind of called out the double halftime scavenger tertiary deck that Hunter Ace has. The way he's done it, I actually do kind of like, because he is doing the kind of thing I talk about, where he's leaning the primary deck kind of towards that Rogue matchup, because he has 2 copies of Frostbolt in it to begin with.
It's true.
Which Fino doesn't. So then, when he chooses to like fully tech for Rogue, it's not a matter of like, oh, there's only 2 cards that he needs to bring in. It's just saying, well, I've already got the 2 Frostbolts, so these halftime scavengers are all I need to complete the package.
Yeah, and also, of course, it's useful to even burn your opponent down, which a lot of times this Mage struggles with to get over that final hurdle in order to close out the game. Although it doesn't seem like Hunter Ace is in the position to do that exactly.
No.
It's like he is on cleanup duty, but he does have 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice. Doesn't necessarily need both of them right now. Gonna go digging with the Magic Trick. Finds decent utility cards, but nothing that impacts the board right now outside of Conjurer's Calling, which he already has.
Right. Magic Trick, like, it might surprise people like how unlikely you are to find something specific. TJ and Admirable were talking about like the total number of mage cards, which I believe is in the 50s. It's like 54 or something. But 20 of those are spells that cost 3 or less that you can find off Magic Trick. So actually you're only something like 15% to find a specific out of Magic Trick. It feels like it should be a lot higher than that. But you saw Hunter Ace react to kind of what was just a bad collection of cards in that spot in terms of the kind of thing he was looking for. Which, you know, it can happen. It's a low chance to find, you know, specific outs. That, on the other hand...
Those 3 options were much better on
yes.
average. I mean, mainly because Blizzard, of course, a way to deal with a wide board and even freeze it. Coincidentally, Psycho's board would not die, which is to Hunter Ace's benefit if he wants to play Sea Giant, even. So this is a really interesting dynamic, and I actually kind of hone in on that a little bit more because we do have a couple of power spikes in both players' hands, but board development and how many minions that exist on the board afterwards is going to be something that Psycho should focus on because he has that Sea Giant, but he also has other 3-mana plays available to him this turn as well.
For sure. We've seen this over the last couple of weeks. We've seen a lot of Rogue versus Mage, as I mentioned, and we've seen the Mages be able to leverage Sea Giants with mirror images and, you know, opposing Snip Snaps and Snip Snaps of their own to really make like huge token-based boards.
Right.
And it's really been a problem when it hasn't been, you know, the Water Rogue variety from Rogue coming up where they don't have Sea Giants of their own to at least be able to clap back against that. Where Psycho, both players are kind of playing this weird dance where they know they have a Sea Giant, they don't know that their opponent has a Sea Giant, so they're kind of both wandering towards the same position now.
Right.
But Psycho draws first blood, getting that Sea Giant down very cheap. Backstab to take care of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Extremely powerful swing turn for Psycho.
Right, and now with that Frost Nova draw, Sea Giant on Hunter Ace's side costs 4 mana because it starts at 10 and there's 6 minions on the board. Sea Giant, of course, being the card on the far left, being a little shy, but he is there. And now Hunter Ace has a few options to stall, but what's his development options that are the best case in this scenario? Because if you do just freeze and you don't have any board development, it doesn't feel like you accomplished a game plan for Mage.
It's true. That Sea Giant has made his turn very, very awkward, which means he might have to divert to just a second Apprentice turn here. And by the way, that is almost always deliberate from a high-level player playing against Mage. Take notice of every time you see Sea Giant Frost Nova just be one-off being castable in a high-level game of Hearthstone. That's not an accident. Psycho has calculated that on his turn and pushed through a situation where he puts Huntrace in that exact spot.
Yeah, the only way that you can cheat out is through mirror images, and incidentally through your opponent's Snip Snap, but there's, the Frostbolt's already been used.
Yep.
Huntrace did have that chance if he had a Frostbolt. Sorcerer's Apprentice, Frostbolt, Sea Giant, Frost Nova, I think, might have been exactly the mana expenditure.
Well, no, you spent 3 at that point to only increase the minion size by 1? That doesn't work, does it? Ah, it doesn't matter.
You discount the Sea Giant by 3 as well, though. But you could be right as well. I might have miscounted there. Psycho, because the board was frozen and the Lackey stay on the board, just gets to play Heistmeier Togwalk on 6. How important is that for this matchup, you think, Sottle?
It's huge. It can actually have massive, massive impact because the main